Hey guys, welcome to another Untier talk. Yeah. Woo! It's that thing. We had Snake. Let's talk about games.
Let's do that.
Yeah. You guys know. I feel like this introduction to Untier talk would be bad for anyone who comes across it and isn't really part of the PU community, but I can't imagine anyone not part of the community coming to listen to Untier talk. So whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Well.
Okay, so we talked about the matchups and predictions last week. Do you want to do chronological or? Yeah, I guess chronological. That's fine.
Yeah, let's do that. We might as well.
So first game would have been Tasker versus Katut. This
game was not the greatest game.
I thought it was not a bad game up until the end. I think Tasker very clearly and solidly outplayed Katut in really good and interesting ways, and obviously the ending sucked, but I found it interesting enough that I actually did I committed to doing a an analysis of the game, and I recorded myself doing it. It was a 40-minute analysis of the game, and then I realized the analysis might not be bad, but I'm not good at making that kind of video, so I enjoyed making it, but it wouldn't have been good to watch, so I just didn't upload it. But I think Tasker played really well. I think he had a much better game plan than Katut. Both in matchup, he actually had Pom Pom as a good mon to set up around, and also just the way he played was just much better in setting up a win con than Katut was. I think it was really interesting in a lot of ways. I just think the ending really colors people.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at it just from a matchup versus matchup perspective, I think the matchup is quite even. I don't think Tasker really has any natural advantages in the matchup. I'd say, because especially if you're looking at Tasker, he has a lot of drops in momentum, Lurantis, Metang, even Gerda to an extent, that's a drop in momentum, and Drampa in particular looked like it could take advantage of that, especially if you can get up some hazards with the Frost Lash.
Well, see, I think this is true in theory. In theory, the matchup could be pretty even, but in practice, it ended up being Fat Spadef Drampa, or I don't think we know if it's Spadef. It ended up being Fat Drampa and SD Victory Bell, and because of those things, I think Tasker was favored in the matchup. But if Katut was special Victory Bell, this would have been a much more even matchup because he actually would have had a much better game plan to break.
Yeah, true. I think just if you're looking at it completely fresh, Tasker would have looked at Katutsi and said, "Okay, I have some outlets, and Keita has some outlets, so I'm gonna be put in a position where I'm gonna have to outplay him." And I think that's why we saw Tasker come out swinging the way if he felt like he had an advantage, he might play a bit more passively, but it didn't play like he had an advantage. He played he had something to gain.
You can see how much he slows down after the first couple turns where you see the Drampa's fat and the Frost Lass is not fast, because Specs Drampa with Fire Blast, offensive Frost Lass, and special Victory Bell all would have been really good in this matchup, and it was none of them. And Tasker visibly slows down, is okay, well I can just defog with the Lurantis for free. But even then, there's a number of times, one turn, I want to look for the turn specifically that I really analyzed in my going over the game. Let's see. One turn I really wanted to find. Okay, there's a point in the game where Katut gets up rocks as Tasker doubles out of the Mudsdale. Katut gets up rocks. Here it is, turn 21. And Tasker's got his Pom Pom in versus the Mudsdale, and it's okay, Pom Pom is Tasker's win con. He can't lose it, or Katut's Girder is going to win the game. He's obviously not gonna let his Pom Pom get toxic to Rock Slit or anything. So Tasker switches back into Lurantis, and Katut just rock slides. And it's you need rocks to pressure the Pom Pom and the rest of his team, but especially the Pom Pom, and you just do a really slow rock slide, especially when you had a Scarf Alola Slash that you could have gone hard into that handles going Lurantis or staying in with Pom Pom. like they're just ways that I don't think Katut played like actually supporting a game plan at all. Obviously, rock sliding a pom pom makes short term sense, but long term, I don't think he played this properly at all.
Yeah, I think Tasker played. He didn't play overly aggressive. Like he didn't risk. Like his doubles were very like precise doubles. Like he basically put Katut in a position where if he was to stay in, like there would have been some like consequence. Like it was very like on edge. He couldn't really like if Katut was to call out the double, it would be a questionable double to call out, for example. So yeah, and on top of that, like he played well around, especially the Durantis set. I feel like that was gonna really be, especially with like not having any recovery. It was gonna be basically how
well he could keep its health preserved because he needed rocks off.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like Katut's win plan is pretty close to like weaken the Rantis, get rid of the pom pom, and you want to win with the girder because nothing else is really a win con here. And
yeah,
that didn't work because Tasker was very careful about always like having a healthy pom pom with rocks off, and Lurantis, he was like willing to let Lurantis get chipped to keep the rocks off for pom pom, and he kept that in check really well. Also, real briefly, are you in a different like setup with your mic or something? Because I'm trying to fiddle with your audio right now. Hopefully, it doesn't sound too bad, but you're spiking a lot.
I'm just in my bedroom. Might be the echo, to be honest.
Huh.
Other than that, not really much change.
It's Untier talk, whatever. So yeah, I think we agree that like Tasker just had a much better handle on this game. I also really think like it really sucked that Katut was Swords Dance Victory Bell because Tasker outplayed the hell out of that, and like I get that it's because his team just loses to stall otherwise, but that really hurt him in the matchup. And like this was a long game too for Tasker to mostly be playing Katut pretty well the whole way through, but then at the very end, Tasker just misses like more hurricanes than he hits, and he loses the game.
Yeah, he had basically a Zap Cannon level of hurricane accuracy this game. That was really bad for him.
Yeah,
I felt so. I was watching the game back because I was on the tube home when this game was happening. And I saw Tasker lost from like a seemingly unlosable situation. I'm like, well, how did this happen? And then it just came to me that Vic just dodged every single hurricane and then crit a poison jab to finish it off. And I was so like angry at the fact that even was like a thing that meant Katut won. Like, because Katut was getting like the worst end of all of the like the plays, the long-term strategy thinking. He got the worst off on everything. And then basically he said, okay, through the strategy thinking, I'll just play for this 2% chance, crit plus miss, like 2% chance. Probably a bit more than that, considering he jabbed multiple times, but around like stupid low percentage chance.
Katut had nothing else to play for. He like that his win con was trying to dodge there, so I don't get that. But like
but like he sort of did that to himself almost with how he was playing in the early game, how long term he was thinking, and then just to see that he would win the game because of that, it's like
it's one of those Pokemon scenarios. Yeah, Tasker played and prepped better, and I don't think that's unfair to say. So yeah. The next one was Soulgazer versus Shake? No. I opened them from the replay thread, not from the actual Snake thread, so I don't actually know what's...
Hold on. I think, actually...
Was it Gary versus False? Yeah, I think it was Gary... Gary versus False. Okay. This one, I also agree with the take that most people who were discussing in Discord were giving, is that, like, Gary, in theory, had a team that, like, looked like it was a good prep for... well, a team that looks super, super you, but in practice just did not work. Like, like this team has things about it that make a lot of sense, and specifically trying to prep for your style of team, yeah, I get it, but there are things that, I guess, to a PU main, really stick out as, like, that doesn't work. Chief among them being only Kabutops is the removal here. You love spikes, but also like spikes and spin block are just generally really good, and his team is very hazard weak. There's some other things that like I think would stand out to a PU main more. Um, like in theory, Alolan Persian isn't so bad, but in practice, I think you're gonna have a really hard time with the way that that pivots on you. In theory, the rest talk Lantern is like gonna absorb Electros's volt switches, but in practice, it's not toxic. So like, what are you doing to it? These kinds of things. Like, I don't think he got into PU well enough to handle this game. You know?
Yeah. So basically, me and Foles were prepping the entire week, and we were thinking along the lines of what would really be like a good a good team to play somebody who we knew didn't really have that much PU experience. And yeah, we were talking about some teams that I'd built, and this is actually a team that I built for Teddy for his open run, except Teddy's team in the open run had a Calm Mind Spiritomb over the Sableye. But False wanted the Sableye so that he could get Kangaskhan better in, which made sense as well. So, yeah, and the Mashana as well as you'd reveal later on as Psychium, because nobody was running Skunk at all, or any type of like Dark type, to be honest. So we thought, okay, if we run that plus Hazards, it should be enough to give False like a good chance in the game. Especially with Kanga being like a kind of anti-offense mod. It's not like a standard wall breaker where it relieves the momentum at the end of the turn. With Sucker Punch and Fake Out, it's really good at like keeping momentum going and making sure that False Gary couldn't really like sort of pressure it out of the game. It's really hard to do that to a Kanga. So that was the main idea behind the team. Try and keep it as basic as possible, like, and try and like just give us the best matchup in as many matchups as possible. And I think what Gary ended up suffering for, even though he ended up having a pretty accurate guess at what the team, I think what he ended up suffering with is the spikes being a really big problem, and just having loads of momentum drains on this team. I feel like his team would have functioned way better if he didn't have a Lantern and didn't have a
Fat Lantern, Fat Tangela. Probopass doesn't necessarily lose momentum as much, but like I really think this mod is not good. And I used to be Probopass's biggest defender for the longest time, and like even with Pharisee back, it's just gross.
I think
one brief thing with your prep and also Tasker's prep. I wanted to wait until this game to bring it up. Both you and Tasker have like these balanced teams that aren't crazy offensive, but like they're also completely and utterly destroyed by Simis here. To a ludicrous extent of this literally can just hit a fire move and win. Also, I guess Turtonator, Specs Drampa Fire Blast even is like is just gonna get kills. Although Specs Drampa just gets kills, that's not really fair. But like, I'm really interested in if that was just something that got overlooked, or like why. Because there's a degree of like, okay, I'm not great versus Simisear, to this team has no fire resists, and it has Sableye, Alolan Sandslash, and Ferroseed. Like, that's kind of crazy.
Yes, but I will say we have the best fire resist in the game, which is Electros. The switch into everything that has a special attack. And it is like a hugely invested, especially bulky Electros as well. I think it has like 200 Spadef, something like that. So it can take a fire move, and the plan is if you can get a Volt Switch off on the Simisear, the team doesn't relieve momentum that badly on Simisear. Like, if Ferroseed's in, it's going to get up rocks. Sandslash is going to be faster than most Simisears, like non-Scarf Simisears. Kanga will obviously be able to use the Revenge Kill Simisear.
Like, you can put up some pressure. It's not as bad as Tasker's, really. But even so, it just really interests me that like the utter lack of a fire resist kind of came out really strong twice is kind of interesting.
Yeah, because if you were really like invested in Simisir and you were like, okay, I need to make sure that I check this, you could in theory swap the Electros for like a Lantern and the team would still make sense. But Vesk is a player where we knew first of all, we didn't know his skill level too well. We didn't know how well he was going to take the DU, and we didn't know what types of teams he was going to bring in the first place. So our first thought was just to cover everything as well as we can, and like covering everything means not covering some things as well. Mm-hmm. So like, it's like is he really going to bring Simisir? Nah, fuck it.
Okay,
we'll just go with this. Yeah.
You have more thoughts on the game? Because I didn't think there was a lot to say about the actual playing involved. There's definitely one point that, like, Gary definitely could have had a better chance if he got a roll on False's Electros, but it didn't seem like the roll was reasonably in his favor unless he was adamant SD Victory Bell, which is just a whole other question on its own. Also, the second game in a row with SD Victory Bell, which is going to be a pattern here of really overusing a set for no good reason.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea behind SD Victory Bell. I mean, it makes sense for Gary just because, like, he might think I'm going to be weak to stall, so he's just going to stall me. So I understand why he would use SD Victory Bell, but he has nothing to like follow it up on. Like,
yeah, I mean,
the things that Victory Bell like enjoys to kill. He doesn't really have things to really abuse that void, apart from like Darth Kabu. There's not much that like benefits from especially if it's Adamant SD Vicky. Like Adamant is a huge investment on Victory Bell because you sacrifice the Stoutland speed tier and you sacrifice like Alola Slash, like Jolly Alola Slash as well. So that's a big speed tier to just like drop out of.
Yeah, I agree. In both cases, it's like, okay, you're gonna have some troubles with stall, so I get it on that level, but It is not as simple as it will do the same things as special, but also break stall. It is actively giving up several things that special can do. Certain mons are better pressured by special. Special overall just like hits moves faster, so it's not as easy to pivot around like we saw with Tasker versus Katut. I think people are going to hopefully realize that just because it can work and will beat many of the same things doesn't mean that it has the same overall threat level. Just because it can, in theory, break through Ferroseed or Metang eventually doesn't mean that it wants to or should. To the same extent that special can, it's much easier to just click HP Fire than anything else. Like,
yeah, to be honest, I don't understand why he even needed the whole like promo pass thing. Cause in this case, like SD Vicky will break through Ferroseed for you, and that that's not going to be an issue. And then the only thing that you really have the promo pass for in the first place, which is a big investment, is like Scarf Kabu. Like that's the only thing that you really invest for. So I don't really understand that selection. Kabu is more like a utility spinner. It's not like a thing where it's going to clean games if you give it support. It's more like
it's utility. It's not.
And I will get.
You don't want to break things for it necessarily. But what I'm thinking is we saw very little of the Jinx. We saw Lefty's Ice Beam, and it never clicked. Lovely Kiss, even in a situation where it probably was. So I'm thinking it's not Lovely Kiss. Maybe it was specifically to trap steals for a Jinx that was no Lovely Kiss, no Focus Blast, but like sub-nasty 2 attacks or something.
It did click Lovely Kiss. It just failed. It he clicked Lovely Kiss on a 7.
Wait, it did? Either way, okay.
Either
way, I'm thinking that it wasn't Focus Jinx, and that was the idea that you needed to trap for the Jinx.
Yeah.
I don't love that, but that's at least to me the rationale behind making it the Pro Pass. Like,
yeah, I mean,
I don't think it's enough. I don't think it really. Again, I don't think it really works. Like, I get why that would be attractive, especially if you're like an old gens player who's more used to, drag mag or whatever. That like, hey, trapping is nice. There are some common steals like Alolan Sandslash and Ferroseed. I get why it would seem that way, but I think to a PU main, it looks a lot more like that's not so good. Yeah.
Yeah, especially in PU where there's more meta checking involved than in those metas where you have like specific checks, specific mons. In this tier, it's more like, okay, I need to check the Stoutland. I'll use a Regirock or Tangela. Like
Mm.
you're not going to like it's not always in that scenario where the switching is like a resist. Like Tangela's a good switching to Stoutland, but it's not a resist. So you have to almost treat the tier a bit differently. And also, I would like to point out just by like the team order of how Gary I think built his team. He went Jinx first, then Probo,
Yeah.
then SD Vicky, and then Scarf Cabu, and then he sort of went super passive with Lantern and the Tan. So I think that might have played into his head like, okay, this is like a 4-mon offensive core that I can use, and then I'll back it up essentially with this 2-mon like balance core. But I feel like it kind of falls flat when the things that you're supposed to check with those two in the balance core, you don't end up checking. Like I can only imagine the devastation that would come versus playing a Dramper. You know what I mean?
Mm. I agree. Do you know what came next chronologically? I know Ziri Ryza was last. It must have been Soulgazer Shake, right? Yeah, it was.
Let me just have a
It
quick
was. It was
look.
Soulgazer Shake. I'm almost certain. The other two games were Sunday, and this was not.
Yeah, it was.
Okay. This was pretty interesting. Soulgazer has a team that's like almost really cool. Where hey, it's using T spikes and Combustion Jellicent, and like hey, that's kind of cool. But then I really hate how it turned out because like the Jelly Mudsdale Rose Core is the thing that we saw like when Jellicent first dropped, and then people stopped using it because it was really abusable. But then on the other hand, Shake has this Tom team that I like also don't really think works in some kind of it just kind of ends up being flawed, and Soulgazer's team can take advantage of Shake's weaknesses much better than Shake can take advantage of Soulgazer's weaknesses. Like I really think
Yeah, that's
Soulgazer
fair.
looks quite ahead in this matchup.
That's fair analysis. I think the Toxic Spike's weakness is the key thing, especially if it's his Death T Spike Rose. I don't think Shake would have necessarily thought at the beginning that it could be T Spike's Rose, more just spikes. But I think what the premise of what Tom was trying to achieve with Shake's team was like a psychic spam, and then you can sort of clean. You have like fast ones with like Primate and Swan, and then you can sort of clean up with those things. But I think generally the idea of psychic spam tends to rely a bit too much on the lack thereof of like good resists or good switch-ins. Like because if you can hold off on Jinx, generally Jinx will like succumb to hazards or speed control or whatever. And the same thing with Mashana. Like all you need really is a toxic and that gets neutralized.
Like Soulgazer doesn't
Quite
have
quick.
great psychic resists, but it didn't really matter. He was still okay
Exactly,
versus
yeah.
it because psychic spam
Yeah,
is
exactly.
not that good, and this is something I haven't worked with in like recent meta really, but in the past I think psychic spam was mostly carried by Messrip being good, not because there was a lot of merit to the idea of psychic spam breaking down psychic checks because psychic checks aren't really something you necessarily think of in the same way anymore. Now that Messrip's gone, like you don't necessarily have things like the Scun Tank or like the I don't know, even Absol is like a psychic check in a very different way than you normally see on most teams, where you're able to keep our psychics in check despite not having these dedicated resists. There's not a lot of for them to break through because that's just not really how they function. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. I think the weird thing is that yeah, I think it is trying to operate in that void that's left by Scunter Tank where teams aren't really running dedicated psychic resist anymore. But it kind of the abusable factor of it is usually when you have a spam core like all the famous spam cores, right? They usually tend to have like one thing that breaks the check and then one thing that cleans, or that they can both function as like one can break and then the other can clean, or one can break and the other can clean. Like
Mm-hmm.
they function as a duo in that way. But I feel like with this thing, it's sort of like Mashana breaks and Jinx breaks, but neither of them abuse the breaking. So you end up almost playing for like a completely separate win con with the Primate or the Swanna,
Yeah.
rather than like one of the psychic ones actually benefiting from the void that
Well,
the other one created.
We also saw like it's very distinct. The Swanna showed itself to be physical. It had Liquidation, it had Brave Bird, and it also had a Roost, and it had Waterium. It used Hydro Vortex. And what I'm thinking is that the last move is probably Rain Dance, right? Like Z Rain Dance kind of thing. It's probably not Defog. You've got the Lurantis there. And that's weird. That's a really weird win con to choose when you're running with your Psychic types like this, because in theory, the Psychic types wall break, and then Swanna outspeeds our common Scarfers. But in practice, this kind of team isn't really supporting breaking down Swanna's checks, I don't think. Like, it kind of pressures some of them, like Eel. But even to the extent that, like, Regirock kind of checks the Swanna, there are a lot of random things that these don't pressure. They're very focused on breaking, like, Psychic types, they kind of just break the random checks that are chosen for them. And I don't think that aligns with this Swanna, and I'm just kind of liking on, like, the specific things. Like, Swanna's big problem is not being that strong, right? Not a lot specifically really walls it, but if you throw like a Ferroseed at it or a Regirock, they might not resist or even be weak to its move, but if they're healthy enough that like Swanna doesn't break them. And Jinx plus Misharna with like no spike support or anything isn't the kind of core that I would choose to try to weaken everything on someone's team, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, you need a lot of around-the-board chip damage, and I don't think that's what Psychic Spam does.
Yeah, but I think we can say as much as we want that the Psychic Spam team wasn't the greatest idea. I feel like even despite all of that, the matchup wasn't even that bad. Like, for Shake, if you look at it, there's not much on Soulgaze's team that can actually kill the Misharna, like straight up kill it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a void there that Shake can play in, and Jinx can play in, and even the Swanna, because Brave Bird will eventually break through both the Sand Slash and the Mudsdale, potentially the Jellicent as well. Like there's a lot of like void there for Shake to play in, and I feel like he didn't quite get on top of SG like the way he should have. I feel like, especially with the turn 1 miss, I think that played heavily in how he decided to play the game. Like, he was trying to rush things a bit too much, even though he still wasn't in that bad a spot. I think.
Okay.
The turn 1 miss.
Yes, but an earlier point you made, I think, is pretty wrong, because nothing can outright kill Misharna, so it could be a problem. But Rose Toxic Spikes on the Rantis. T-Spikes are going to be up. There's very little Shake can do about it. And, like, that is all Soulgazer really needs to be able to kill the Misharna. So I don't entirely agree with that. I do agree on the rush point, though. Like, you see, the Jinx gets kind of unlucky early on. And, yeah, that sucks. But Soulgazer didn't really need the Electros. So, like, it wouldn't have been the worst thing for Soulgazer. But then also the second thing to die is the Swanna, which is what he needed to check Combustion. And as soon as that happened, it's like Combustion plus T-Spikes were just inevitable. There was nothing, like no other outcome was really going to happen. Soulgazer just kind of does the whole T-Spikes plus Combustion thing, and he wins. And it's just that simple, because he needed the Swanna alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we see essentially the third eye open set, or the third eye open strategy from like XYNU, where it's just like sub lefties, protect, and just use the hell out of Toxic Spikes and stuff like that. It's quite interesting to see Combustion, but like I feel like the more broken set essentially is like Swords Down, but you know, seeing Combustion like speed boosts and stuff like that, it's like you can see where like the scariness comes in and why like he's trying to support it. I just feel like it could have been a much better and closer game, especially if the Lovely Kiss in the first place hit.
Yeah.
And also if like there was more patience essentially around how Shake.
Absolutely. I do think SD is more scary in general, but obviously with T-Spikes, like you can see where Special is coming from. I also think that like the one real saving grace for Shake that gave him enough leeway to make it look kind of close was that Future Sight Masharna really did some work, and that
Yeah.
after Shake lost his two Mons, he's kind of like, oh shit, I'm not in a good position. He started really playing up that Future Sight Masharna, and the way that plus the Lurantis was able to like pressure, like that was good, what got him like all the kills he got, all the pressure he got, and he played it really solidly and made a real case for the power of Future Sight there. So that I think is absolutely worth looking into. The one real thing I did, like, I really like that from Tom's team. Psychic Spam came out a little weird. Obviously, he also agreed that, like, in hindsight, he didn't like how he ran Lurantis on a team that just died to Victory Bell. Like,
Yeah,
for the most part, you can make a case that this team at least offensively pressures Victory Bell enough. But then you have Lurantis and nothing that actually is going to switch into Sludge Bomb, and that's just that's when people say, "Oh my God, Victory Bell is so broken," because you prep like that. It's gonna go ham versus something like this. So that's something he directly admitted. So I felt it was worth bringing up that, like, I think Shake was definitely a little let down there, but also the early game that he played really hurt his chances because the Masharna just did so much work. Imagine if he had the Swan.
To be honest, yeah, I didn't understand why he didn't lead with it. To be honest, because you can tell just from the team preview that the Scarf or the Alolan Sand Slash would be the starter, like immediately. Like you can almost tell Soulgaze's like composition.
Yeah.
Straight away, like you know it's AV Eel, you know it's Rox Mudsdale, you know it's going to be some Fizdef Jellicent.
Well, AV Eel is like the only Eel. That's not fair.
Yeah. Yeah, like so the only thing that really changes is Roselia running T spikes and is Combustion special or physical, and either way, like you could have just led Masharna, and the worst case scenario is essentially if you lead the Mudsdale, which you have a free switching into Lurantis anyway. Yeah, there's like loads of ways that he could have gone about playing this game that didn't involve like lovely kissing turn one.
Okay, but, even that, like if he had been a bit luckier, that could have been fine-ish. I think the real issue is how early Swanna died, because you can't lose your Swanna. You need that shit. He's got a Combustion. Like,
yeah.
First of all, straight up no, like that should not have happened. But then second of all, the way it died, I don't like. It was very clear. Like that didn't have to happen. He liquidated into Roselia, predicting it to switch out. As Shake was pretty okay with like taking the hit because he knew it could live, because physical Swanna that's not Z move like is not that strong, and the Roselia was fat enough, and he knew that the Roselia would be able to heal itself up later on, and he knew that he wanted to remove the Swanna. Like, all of that really goes into, you don't have a good Roselia switch in, like it kind of needs to be Masharna, but still, that Swanna just needs to stay alive, and ultimately, like, that kind of just decided the game really early, no matter how many Masharna plays he made with the Future Sight stuff.
Yeah, it's there's loads of ifs and buts in this type of game, and I think overall, I think the better team, as much as I hate to admit that, like ended up winning the game.
Yeah, even though the better team was still the Roselia, Mudsdale, Jellicent core. It's just a little tired, but I think Shake is definitely gonna keep impressing. Sam versus Ima. This is an interesting one, all right. Sam did his normal shit. Ima brings a Teddy team, and there's a lot of weird facets about that. I don't know, like, as we've been recording this, Teddy just talked in Discord about how he thought that Ima would have had a very easy matchup if he had played differently, and instead Sam arguably lost because of a toxic miss.
Yeah, I feel like I completely agree with that. To be honest, I don't think Ima played in a way which was, I'm going to minimize risk and have like a strategy. It was more like, I'm going to play turn by turn and just sort of out team Sam, which ended up working out for him, but only because like scenarios happened with toxic missing inside.
Yeah, So like very early on, it seems like he has a bit of an idea of like, okay, I'm kind of weaken this team with Electros, get that eject button, get start killing things with Drampa, trade some rocks. Like, I don't hate the start absolutely, um, but then like Sam I think played the Toxic Primate really well. Like he got the Primate in where he knew the knockoff was coming, and he like really had that down with not only using the toxic but like removing the scarf. Really, I don't think it was on anyone's mind, so that was cool from him. um but Ima still kept things very hard the way he went about playing, where I really thought it was an early game issue that I had, but looking at it, it's more late game where like Drampa, or like at least middle game, Drampa does very little. He lets Alola Slash get chipped pretty hard early on so that Pom Pom starts looking more and more threatening. Like, consider he has 3 Pom Pom checks with Scarf Drampa, Specs Drampa, sorry, AV Eel, and Alolan Sandslash. And those are like the 3 things, like, Drampa and Eel are the first things to die, and Sandslash is already chipped to like 35% by turn 20. Uh, it didn't have to be that scary, you know?
Yeah, 100%. I think, yeah, just generally how I ended up playing the game, just sort of, it was weird in that way where it's like, it's, you have the devices that you need essentially to win the game like quite comfortably. You just have to play them out. But what ended up happening is that you kind of ended up uh, like not using them with like efficiency. Like you're not efficiently using the ones that you have, and almost rushing the game, as we were talking about last time. Like you ended up rushing the game a bit, and then you ended up, you know, on the back foot. And then when that toxic missed, it was more like, okay, Sam doesn't really have a chance now because first of all the like surprise factor.
No,
Toxic,
let's be clear
like,
here. Sam still had a chance after the toxic missed. At the point that toxic
yeah,
at the point that toxic missed, it was still, this was only turn 10, and Sam still had 100% pom pom in the back. After that, immediately after that, pom pom gets burned. It's at 64% when it switches out, and the next time it comes in, it switches directly into Mudsdale Rock Slide and dies. Now, I'm not saying that Sam was at an advantage here, but Sam needed that pom pom. It was again his best Pokemon in the matchup, very similar to the way Tasker's was, where it like the Ima's Mudsdale and Sandslash were both chipped away, so like pom pom like was absolutely required, and Sam sacked it in a way that I don't think made any kind of sense whatsoever. Like that was really the turn where like I have so much faith in Sam. I'm still predicting him to win next week, but god damn it, you gotta like he's better than a play like that, and I don't know, like that just should not have happened ever.
Yeah, I feel like especially as soon as the scarf came off of the primate, I feel like Sam almost opened himself up to the primate on the other side of the team, because I feel like what Teddy was talking about earlier on was that the primate actually wasn't choiced. It wasn't a choice band. It wasn't a choice scarf. It ended up being, I think, Rockium Z. I don't think he ended up revealing it in the game.
Oh, okay.
It's
really
Rockium. You can tell, yeah. You can tell by the fact that the scarf is on the Alola Slash that the primate isn't really going to be your standard scarf primate.
I don't agree with that at all. I think Alola Slash is something you can absolutely run dual scarfers for because it's a utility mon. Like, it's good to have that speed. It can do damage. It's kind of hard. It's mildly hard to switch into. It has removal, but it doesn't. Scarf Primate is different. It's actual speed control. Alola Slash outspeeds most of the unboosted tier, but it doesn't outspeed any sweepers, any speed boosting sweepers at all. So I can see why he would still want Primeape here, because it's not the kind of team, like if you look at Soulgazer's team, it has only Scarf, Alolan, and Sandslash, but it has Fat Rose and Mudsdale and Jellicent, and if Shake had something like an Omastar, you wouldn't say, well, he's fucked. Here, though, like, Scarf Primate makes a lot of sense because Omastar looks scary. Combuskin can be really scary, and PU has very few speed boosting sweepers, really. So I get it. I know why people are laying off, but like, this is where I would absolutely expect the dual Scarf because every speed boosting sweeper looks really scary, except for the ones that Sableye wisps, like the physical ones that have nothing around that. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, that
it's
I
I
really
think that's
don't
what
I
ended up
really
being.
don't think it doesn't look like Scarf Primate here at all.
Yeah, I think when you put that stuff into like perspective, that there is a chance where it couldn't be Scarf Primate, or it could be Scarf Primate, sorry. But I think in the end, it ended up being. I think I've seen the team before. It was like uh, Rockium or whatever, like an offensive E-belt set. Um, so I think that's what Teddy was talking about more so than the fact that Ima could have played more around like the Primate, um, especially after the knockoff went off on the Primate, on the opposing Primate, on Sam's one, that the your own ape can play more of a role, especially if you're bringing it in offensively. There's still chances there for you to get some good breaks. So
Yeah, I don't know. Rockium is really interesting though. Like I appreciate the idea, and it's just kind of weird though. Like you already have a eject button Sableye into Drampa. Your breaking's pretty strong. I'm not sure that Rockium Primate is super necessary here because also I guess what exactly are you breaking for? I don't know. That really flips my perception of Ima's team, but I still do agree with the overall concept that like Ima wasn't really minimizing the risk of like what Sam's pom pom could do, what Spikes could do potentially, how annoying Sam's Mudstale was in the middle game. None of that was really minimized, especially the way he sacked Electros pretty early, so it came closer. But yeah, turn 23, Sam expects Ima to switch out with his Mudstale. Ima predicts it and rock slides Sam's pom pom, and like, that's just not good. That really is a problem because otherwise Ima very like really would have needed to win at least one, if not more, guessing games of like, is Sam going to kill the Sableye with pom pom, or is he going to roost up on the taunt? It could have been closer, but still, Toxic Miss also like objectively did really hurt. I think if Sam hit that, there's a very good argument that he was going to win. But yeah, sometimes you also got to play perfectly. Like that doesn't justify the misplays.
uh-huh.
Also, again, I'm still watching the PU Discord while we're recording, and apparently, Shake didn't necessarily choose to get benched. Tom is getting chosen to start week 2, which I don't know if you knew, but that I found that pretty interesting. Where I'd always assumed that like Shake was just going to be the starter, and Tom wasn't planned to be started at all. So. I'm pretty sure I've said that. I'm pretty sure I've said that at least. So if anyone got that impression from me, that's apparently wrong.
Yeah, I think overall, I think having good competition in PU slots is important, and I think the thing Shake suffered from was like not really. I don't feel like he used the team so much before the game where. Like, he looked at Solgate's team and thought, okay, this is my win con, this is my clear path to victory. Whereas if Tom Holland was to look at that game, it would be like that. It would be like, okay, he doesn't have a psychic resist, I can use this and this to win the game. And it would have been, I think, a bit closer if Tom was playing. So potentially, I think that's what Ojama, whoever their manager is, thinking.
Yeah, it's Ojama and Lax. I agree, but I still think there's some questionable things about that, which we'll get to when we talk about the week 2 matchups.
Yeah.
But the last game first, because Ryza versus Zeri is another game that definitely happened. This was definitely a thing. Really, really weird game overall. Definitely the weirdest we saw here. Because Zeri goes for, like, I get what Zeri was going for with his team. This is a Zeri plus Telenet creation. Like I said, I don't think it entirely works, but I at least respect the concept. And it didn't exactly have the worst matchup, despite how awkward it is. Um, it's like
Yeah.
an Absol Simisear breaking thing with a Scarf Pom Pom that's probably the removal, and also like a Sableye and Bronzor, and to try to like meta check everything, which is really where I feel like the team breaks down because Sableye, Bronzor, Lantern as a defensive core is just woof.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Like, oh no.
that's just such bait for everything, isn't it? Like, you look at the team and it just gets annihilated by hazards, and I'm like, if it's not Scarf like Absol or Simisage, which is like
It's Scarf Pom
really
Pom.
tough, and
We're almost
yeah,
certain
it
it's
ended up
Scarf
being
Pom
Scarf.
Pom.
It is Scarf Pom Pom. They knocked it off. But I mean,
Oh,
like,
okay.
that's your hazards control, Scarf Pom Pom. Like, that's not really that's not how it works, isn't it? Like, you need better hazards control. But that
Yes.
being said, like, even though like Ryza got a really good start as well, the game came like super close because the Simisage just sort of killed everything at a certain point,
Yeah.
which is kind of funny.
So on the other side,
Yeah.
Ryza has a more standard-looking team. He's using He's using a Spikes and Rocks Ferroseed. He's got an Eel to pivot around, and Defensive Jellicent also is like a fairly pivoty defensive Mon. Doesn't lose too much momentum. And then he's got 3 like pretty strong breakers with Rotom, Kanga, and Victreebel. And that I get, but also when it comes down to it, that team's kind of slow. It's not relying on outs. It's Scarf Rotom, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would have to be Scarf Rotom.
I'm pretty sure, but
But
it's
with,
still even that leaves it like kind of slow. It's not relying on reliably outspeeding things. It's more like I have Kangaskhan and some fat stuff to check sweepers because like I like Scarf Rotom. I think it's a little questionable sometimes. I overall like it, but it's not always the greatest at like outspeeding and checking things because a lot of the time you need to click Blizzard, and that's just a problem. So when it comes to Rosiri having things like the Simisage, that presents a real threat where it outspeeds almost everything. The Kanga can fake out, the Ferroseed and Eel and Victreebel all like kind of check. The Scarf Rotom can outspeed, but like it's still able to put up a decent offensive presence despite like the theoretical checks Ryza had to it, and we saw in the game that like that's kind of what kept Ziri in, as well as just Bandit Absol had a pretty, or no, it was SD Twinkle Tackle Absol in this case had a pretty nice matchup here.
Yeah, that as well. But I think what ended up boning Ziri was that, as we said earlier, like the passive backbone and the lack of as control. That's what really punished, because Kanga, when you give it like a late game where it can clean 3 or 4 Pokemon, especially with all the hazards up, like that's probably the most capable Pokemon in the entire like meta at doing that. Like outside of the Scarf.
Oh
outside
yeah.
of the Scarf is like it's you basically put Kanga in like the perfect position to win that game. And I think Ryza, even though it got scary, I felt like he always had it in control because he had Kanga in the back and it could do essentially what ended up happening.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's pretty telling. Like a few things play into that. Ryza doesn't even opt to go for spikes early on when he has the opportunity. Instead, he shows that one of his other moves on Ferroseed is knockoff, and knocking off the Bronzor, well, that's Ziri's main Kanga check, and it also turned out to be the I think it's a Telenet set that I've seen like TJ and Ziri and other people use, and obviously Telenet's on the team where it's like a protect Bronzor and not a rest Bronzor. And that definitely is like, it's not going to be around as much to check the Kanga and the Victreebel. Also, the Victreebel again here, SD Victreebel. This one, I think, is a little... Like, I guess Ryza could struggle with stall, but not... Like, I really feel like he's enough to play versus stall that I don't like the SD.
No way. No way. There's no way, because if the stall has anything for Ferroseed, like, even Articuno at that point, like, is a decent enough Ferroseed, like, counter where Ryza won't get any hazards momentum. So Ryza's Wincon is going to be Jellicent, or like critting the Quagsire with Double Edge or something. Like,
I think you might be underestimating how much pressure the Victreebel Kanga Jellicent core can put up against stall. I think that's really not bad as far as things that are going up against stall go. I think it's actually Pretty good way to, to output a lot of pressure. Victory Bell on its own. Special Victory Bell does not automatically win break versus stall, but like it really is a pain for stall.
Yeah, no, that's fair. But I think overall, if you look at like what Ryza was going for with the team, it was less so I'm going to prepare for this specific matchup, and more like I'm going to prepare for everything, and whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, I know, but I don't know. I think SD Victory Bell is something where like you have so much momentum that why lose it? I don't know. It's just but it is worth pointing out because this is the third SG Victory Bell we've seen in 5 Snake games. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that is interesting, especially how good the special set is. Like,
yeah,
if you were to look at this week on its own without any like perspective on the PU meta, you would think SD Victory Bell was like the dominant set, and then like special was like a niche thing. That,
absolutely
on occasion, but. Little do they know, special is the far more like common, and like in many ways it just fits better on a lot.
Even the people who really like physical still admit special is the overall better set. Also, I admit I frame that a little bit as like purely being it is really mostly for stall, but I suppose Ryza does not want to lose too much momentum to Electros here, so perhaps he just was like, I want to Z move it for 90 instead of 50. Like that could have been the thought process.
Yeah, there's actual benefit to him actually Z-moving the Electros though, because you can see like Rotom really abusing that space, or Jellicent, or Ferroseed. Like there's loads of room.
Yeah, he struggles with Electros. So in that sense, I can see it. I just think special like nukes it plenty hard anyway. But what we saw is it really getting to break very early. Like the Bronzor gets knocked off, it kills the Sableye, and already this defensive core is just not working out because it's not that strong of a defensive core here really. But like Ziri still managed to play pretty solidly to get it back. I don't think Ryza ever really played badly. He was still like fair, like mostly kept it pretty safe. He didn't want to take many big risks. He played it pretty safe, and he kept himself where like he still had a solid win plan. But Ziri had some strong doubles, like where he got the Absol into SD and break up a bit. That like, it came down to a kind of close end game until Ryza revealed that he had the Spikes Ferroseed, and like there was no way Kanga wasn't cleaning.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff here.
Fun game.
Week 2 matchups then?
Yeah, we might as well.
Okay. Tom Holland versus Sam I Am. This is weird.
I worry for Sam here. I worry for Sam.
I'm still pulling for him, but he definitely had a bit of a rocky start. The thing is with Tom, his biggest win on anyone in a PU tour right now is either Adam or Gum in Open. He really does not have a lot of experience, and I think his teams are decent and he has a lot of cool ideas, but they're not hyper refined. He's a solid player. I've played against him. Like, he's not absolutely nobody, even despite his like no real like tour results, even by PU standards. Like, he's not a bad player, but he's not, like Snake starter caliber. I don't know. That being said, if there's any one person in this starting lineup I think he could beat, it's probably Sam. Like, even Gary the Gengar is probably an overall better player. Like, Ziri tends to be really solid despite not, like, being, like, top of the pack. But Sam has definitely had some rocky plays, and he builds very linearly, and he's made some big chokes in the past. And if there's anyone that can really, like, Tom can get a win against and then start some momentum and start pulling a good record, like, it's pretty fortuitous that this is his matchup in week 2, I think.
Yeah, I'd say Tom is like a gem in the rough, in a sense, where he's got all the ideas, he has the creativity, and he has the wit to create teams and to make like decent teams. But I feel like the reason why he's in the rough and he's not a gem in full flow is that
those teams tend to have, even though they have good matchups and good ideas, is that they're weak in some way. Where like Sam, even though
that's not what a diamond in the rough means. I think a better metaphor might be an uncut diamond where he's not like refined yet, but
yeah,
that's not what it. I'm sorry. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just attacking your metaphor. That should be my slogan. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just attacking your use of metaphor.
I mean, fine. You can do that. I mean, I think overall though, like I honestly can't see Sam winning this game, even though like he's the more experienced player by far, and he's like a really good player. Like on his day, Sam is probably like a top 5 PU player. But the thing is, when it's not on his day, he's probably a bottom 5 PU player. So like, do we get the Sam that's like super like offensive and he calls out strategies and he plays things really well and offensively? Because he's one of the few players that can do that. Like he's one of the few players that can play offense and play it well. Like him and Tasker, you've probably put in that boat. So
wow, I'm offended.
I mean,
no, I agree, and I'll split the difference. If Sam loses, I'll predict against him for the rest of the tour until he's subbed out for Rexus or Jerry. There you go.
Yeah, I think now when you look at the members team, like Rexus isn't really starting, so he could very easily slot into that PU slot if Sam ends up underperforming or doesn't end up playing well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, Rexus had a really good PU build, didn't he? I mean, he was on my team, so of course he would.
Yeah, I mean, he had a less good one than others, but I think it was mostly because he couldn't play several weeks, if I recall correctly.
I think he lost a couple. Like one game, he lost because he played black white, and I passed him a team without.
Oh yeah, he had to play black white, and that went poorly. Although I did say that I think this is the best possible matchup for Tom to like start gaining momentum, but really Sam too. Like if Sam can pick up this win versus Tom and get his momentum back on, like we said, when he's on, he's really on. So one of them is going to be coming out looking real good, and one of them is not, unless the game is like really ugly somehow. Unless it's like a Katut versus Tasker, where Tasker doesn't get the momentum from winning, but Katut doesn't get to look good.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. I think the only way Tom Holland really like struggles to like get into the team next week is if he gets absolutely smoked by Sam, but I don't think that's going to happen. So,
and also like it doesn't matter how bad he does, he's not going to look that bad because like you're new and there's no expectations on you, so that's definitely pretty freeing. Whereas Sam is like, I don't know, trying to live up to the fact that he's not really put up any good tour results in a long time, or like Teddy has to live up to that number 1 slot. There's nothing on Tom. Katut versus False. I think we can agree that False looks better here because he's your player, but also Katut like looked real bad versus Tasker.
Yeah, I feel it's weird because Katut, he took a lot of risks. Something that we didn't talk about in the game. He took a lot of risks at matchup, which I wouldn't necessarily associate that you would take against Tasker. Like you look at his team just from like a broader perspective. He has a lot of stall breaking and a lot of like.
He's good versus stall and hyper offense, but he's not good versus balance.
Yeah, anything in between. Like he's taking a lot of like fringe matchups and saying, "Okay, I predicted him to do this," and when Tasker didn't do that, it's like, "Oh, well, this is a tough scenario."
But I just think that's Katut. That's like his normal. That's his normal shit, and it's a problem because Katut's never been like the strongest player as much as a really good prepper. But balance versus balance is like the main matchup where you really have to just outplay the other person, because balance seems to have more leeway to do that. And Tasker clearly showed, you try to balance me, I'll just play better and then miss hurricanes, but I'll still play better.
I mean, the missing hurricanes bit can be like highlighted somewhere. Somebody needs to like make a Zap Cannon hurricane thing and just give it to Tasker.
I do want to ask you though, so when I did my snake prediction post, I said I'm pretty sure Katut is either 1-0 or 2-0 versus you in PU tours, and I didn't go back and find this, but my memory definitely states that Katut has like a good record versus you.
think so. I think he beat me once when we were in like a semis in like a PU season. I think he might have beat me once again, like earlier on in a PU season. But yeah, I think I got one over him in PUPL, but we ended up hiking him.
Yeah, that was when Finch froze his odd no to win with Rotom F versus Stall.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about Katet's PUPL being like a real bad 1-4, but with that it was close to being 2-3. Not good for his standards, but like, you know.
Yeah, I mean there were other games. I think he hacks the one that he won as well, though. That's the thing.
Oh, maybe. I don't remember.
I believe he hacks the one that he won, but
we'd have to go back and check. It doesn't matter. The point is, like, that's the one thing I could see where Katet like has something at least. He has in the past beaten your kind of team style, but other than that, False looked good and Katet did not. And like, you know, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, something that I'd also add to that is like False isn't like a potato when it comes down to building stuff. Like he builds content.
Jed 2019, False is not a potato.
I mean, like, I can build him a team if he wants, and he can use that team and he can win. Like you saw that last week. But
yeah,
if he wants to build a team on his own, like if he wants to bring some out there hyper offense team, and he has done so in the past, like in exhibitions or as PU and in the past, he has been able to bring those types of crazy webbed hyper offenses and straight up hyper offense team. So I wouldn't want to limit him in that way. Like I'm not going to be overlooking him and say you have to use my teams. I would want him to be able to be like unpredictable in that way. So if he comes and he says, look, I have this brilliant hyper offense team, and I say, yeah, I agree, you know, that's something that he can do because he's capable of it. So that's something that's also add. Like even though like I'm here to help, like he's not a potato, he can win games on his own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like the last team was so clearly you that I think we'll probably see a bit more False or even Evagero come out next week.
Yeah.
We didn't even really like mentioned Evagero, which he's definitely a contributor there. Tasker versus Soulgazer. What's your take? Because obviously, I think we can agree this is like the most hype and closest to predict matchup this week. But what are you thinking? He yawns. Tasker versus Soulgazer. Not interested.
My heart says Tasker, but my brain says SG. I think.
Yeah.
It's super weird in that way because I feel like even though Tasker is super good and knows the meta very well, I feel like he has weeks where he's on, and like that was last week, and then he very quickly turns to off, and then he turns back on again, and it's like that constant fluctuation. If he can play consistently at the level he played versus Kentucky, he'll end up this tour with like a 6-3 record, or like, you know, he'll do super well. But
yeah,
it's just that SG you don't have any data on him. Like you don't know.
Yeah, you have nothing on SG, and you have a lot on Tasker. You have he is one of the players that is willing to go out of his preferences, and like he'll bring a stall sometimes, but for the most part, he really does kind of stick to similar-ish things, and in PU that works. Like Tasker and Sam can really specialize in offense, and that can still be fine, but you have to walk a very fine line, and Soulgazer is the kind of player where that does seem like a pretty scary prospect.
Yeah, for sure. I think the thing is with SG is that the one thing you do know is that he's not going to bring the same, like he's not going to bring Gently, Roselia.
Oh, I hope not. Jesus.
Like sample teams constantly. You know, he's gonna as the tour goes on, he's gonna adapt and land the tier much better than he does like at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So you just hope that he doesn't pick up the tier just as he plays Tasker as well. But yeah, it's gonna be an interesting matchup, especially on how both players decide to prep for this game. It's gonna be close
for sure. Ryza versus Gary the Gengar. I know tour players were still predicting for Gary, but I have to say, I really was not. I wasn't impressed with the way he got into week one. I think he brought things that like showed some inexperience with PU, which is really what you don't want to have in your teams as a tour player whose selling point is I'm going to outplay them even though I don't know this meta. And Ryza definitely came out looking a lot more solid. So like I still definitely think he looks a lot better to win this, but maybe Gary will pick it up and come out a lot stronger this week.
Yeah, I think I like how Ryza prepped for the first game in terms of like creating a solid team. If he can do something similar where, he builds another solid team.
If he can build a solid team, he'll be solid.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. But, like, that's the thing. Like, I worry for Gary in the point where, like, can you build a team that actually beats Ryza? Like, forget all the memes and forget, like, the, like, standard stuff that you could bring. Like, can you build a team that's just capable of winning, like, first of all? Because I feel like Ryza, even though he hasn't been, like, that successful in tours, I feel like that's been a product of him being hacked a little bit, and also because, like, he's never really had the team sport, like, or, like, people, like, helping him about the team. On this team, like, he has Finch, who's, like, one of the biggest tryhards in the history of the universe. And, like, he knows the meta quite well, and I feel like this is the matchup where he tends to do well in it as well, where it's, like, he's versus a player that's not that well versed in PU.
Yeah, it looks good for him.
This is I favor Ryza heavily in this one.
And then we have Teddy versus Ziri. Obviously, Teddy's, like, everyone pretty much expects him to win. I think Ziri is not bad. He brought a team I didn't love. Like, I get what he was going for, and I think it's cool. I don't think it really worked in practice as much. And I don't think he looks like that terrible going to week 2, but it's Teddy, and you're going to predict in favor of Teddy. So,
yeah. I think the thing that Teddy is really good at doing is, like, you can prep for Teddy, but he'll still win. Like, that's the tough part about it. Like, you can bring however many taunt Simisears and taunt Simisages that you want. Like, he still has, like, a very good head on his shoulders where, like, even under pressure, he'll make the correct decision.
I like how you go to think of things and beat Teddy. Taunt Simisear and other taunt Simi. Yeah, just all the taunt monkeys. But yeah, Teddy's good, and I don't think we need to say much more on that, especially since we're already over an hour in. So let's just leave it at that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
We did a VR update too. Victory Bell's an A+, and Victory Bell and Electros is an S because they're getting hyped up. We also ranked Levani, which is just fucking atrocious and shouldn't have happened. That's all it needs saying, I think.
Yeah.
Why, Ajad?
It's not that bad. I swear to God.
Webs is an unrankable playstyle. We should be unranking Shuckle. We should be unranking Levani. It is that bad.
I mean, I'm not going to argue, but I am going to argue. I'm going to say that Levani is, like, of all of the web setters that you could possibly pick, I'd probably say Levani is probably the best one.
Okay, then let's unrank Shuckle at least. But still, it doesn't matter that it's the better web setter. It's unviable. The same way that if Trick Room was completely unviable, I would say nuke Ursaring. Like, well, Ursaring's not completely unusable off Trick Room, but, like, you get the point. Like,
yeah, I mean,
this is actually the thing I find more annoying than the Electros to S. Even though I did vote against that, I don't think it's an S rank mon, but I understand why, and it's certainly not, like, bad. It's not a big misrepresentation of the meta where we're at. I just think it's not gonna last. Like, that was what me and LST said, and everyone else was like, no, but where it is right now. So I get that.
Yeah, I think Eel will evolve with the meta as well. Like, I think sub-coil Eel will become more of a thing.
Oh,
people,
God.
like, begin to fall into their traps of, like, using mud eel, like, balance cores and stuff. Like, sub-coil eel will be there to feast on your lives. And I think there's room as well for, like, physical U-turn eels. Even on AV, like, to
that absolutely flourish. Yeah, I like U-turn.
Yeah, I think overall, I'm for it being an S rank just because it's really good at, like, showing what the meta is right now, and it's really momentum based. Like, you cannot have too many, like, lapses in momentum in this current meta. So it's a good representation of, okay, the meta's at this point where you need to have, like, things to, like, pressure eel, otherwise you will just lose.
I mean, yeah, it is that good, And at least S rank does at least represent that, where do not fuck yourself versus eel, or you're kind of screwed. One more thing to do. It has been an hour and 10 minutes. Bear with us because we do have a Dad's Gimmick Corner.
Yay!
Yay!
So
big enthusiasm.
Have you struggled with the checking of Victory Bell, especially the physical set?
Yes, I try to use Muck, and then it gets +2 Z power whipped, and it dies. Very sad.
Interesting.
Send help.
Right. Have you ever considered that physically defensive Eviolite Blitzel can solve your problems?
No.
Neither have I. I just thought of that right now, and it's awful. Don't use that. Do not use that. Other things, in other news, other things that actually look kind of okay, like Trick Room Behemoth, with Skuntank not being a thing as much anymore.
Oh god, we need to see more Skuntank. I know it's not as good, but I think 0 uses in the first 10 games of Snake, I think would be really bad. I want to see a Skuntank next week, please.
Yeah, I feel like Special Defog Skunk is actually pretty good, considering you can defog on all the spikers, and you do a good amount of damage to Mudsdale and Regirock. Yeah. So it's a super good, that in particular, that has a lot of utility. I think overall, I should also mention that you roast Victory Bell as well with the Fire Blast, which is really useful considering nobody runs resist for it anymore.
Oh, I roast SD Victory Bell Fire Blast or not.
Yeah. I mean, yep, fair enough. You do that.
Shitty set.
Yeah. Trick Room Behemoth is actually kind of scary.
Yeah.
Now that the thing isn't being used, it can almost function like a mini Executor in that way.
How much stronger is Behemoth than Masharna?
Analytic plus, I think about...
Not counting Analytic, we're talking Trick Room, right? Masharna has base 107 special attack, and Behemoth has base 125. That's not bad. Plus, Behemoth does have the T-Bolt coverage. I don't think Masharna gets T-Bolt, question mark?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, so, T-Bolt's at least, not bad neutral. I don't even know if it'd run T-Bolt, actually. You're going to have Psychic. You can have Shadow Ball HP Fighting, maybe? Shadow Ball... Or maybe T-Bolt HP Fighting, or... I don't know. Just a thought, because people are messing with Masharna, and it does have that bulk. Masharna's bulk versus Behemoth's is notable at being able to, set up that Trick Room and still have some utility. So just a thought. But yeah, I agree. These Psychic types are going to start popping up more. Psychic Spam didn't work out, but Future Sight on its own still did. We saw multiple Jinx usages. So yeah, I like the Trick Room stuff.
Honestly, now that you bring up Masharna, why wasn't the Tom Holland team? Why didn't that have a Trick Room Masharna over what it had, a Future Sight? Then it makes sense with the Lovely Kiss, the Lovely Kiss thing, the Lovely Kiss Jinx. Then you have that breaker cleaner type board that you have there.
I mean, I still don't think Jinx necessarily breaks Masharna's checks all that great. I still don't think they pressure the things all that well, and the Trick Room wouldn't have been as good defensively unless it's Trick Room Moonlight 2 attacks or something. But yeah, I could definitely see it. It should have been Future Sight and then Z Lovely Kiss to be a sweeper. That would have been better. Still not entirely pressuring the same thing, but I think that at least made more sense instead of going with the likely Z Rain Dance Swanna. But we're digressing again. It's been an hour and 15. Let's just cut it. Let's just end this shit. We should probably try to do less analysis. It's good, and I appreciate people who like the content, but I'm reasonably certain when things hit an hour and 15, some people just do not listen. And yeah, I don't blame them.
Okay. Comment if you're still listening. I would like to see if you're still listening.
At the very least, people have said that my ASMR voice keeps them the entire way. People like my voice. I honestly can't tell the difference. I don't hate the sound of my own voice, but I can't say why it's better than anyone else's. Maybe it is just like absolute memeing, but I think it's come up enough that some people actually like the sound of my voice, which is a very, very weird thought. The internet's a scary place, dude. I'm scared. Help.
People are tracking you.
Yeah, okay. Send help, and we'll talk to you next week.